She lived in a house where revelation descended, a house where a prophet prayed day and night, a house where the truth was never hidden. She heard the call of Allah for generations.
The world sees a messenger. I only see a man talking to shadows.
She watched a man chosen by God endure mockery, hunger, and pain. She saw faith tested and mercy offered again and again. Yet when salvation stood before her, when the ark was ready, she did not reject it out of ignorance. She rejected it out of pride.
I would rather stand with the kings and drown than bow with the beggars and survive.
She did not drown because she lacked proof. She drowned because she refused to submit. This is the terrifying story of the woman who lived beside Prophet Nūḥ alayhi salam and still chose disbelief. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach hearts across the world. It was a house that should have softened the hardest heart. A house where the name of Allah was spoken before dawn and after nightfall. A house where patience was not preached from a distance but lived day after day, year after year. Within those walls stood a man chosen by Allah, Prophet Nūḥ alayhi salam, whose life was a living sermon. His prayer was not rushed, his trust was not shaken, his mercy did not expire with rejection. He called to Allah in the quiet hours of the night, and he called in the noise of the day, when mockery filled the streets and stones of disbelief weighed on his chest. And inside that same house, the message was never absent. Truth was not distant. Guidance was not hidden. Every day, reminders of Allah surrounded her. She saw patience that did not break. She witnessed mercy that did not withdraw. She heard words that had the power to revive dead hearts. Yet something inside her remained untouched. This is the danger that few recognize. Not the danger of ignorance, but the danger of familiarity. When truth becomes routine, when reminders lose their weight. When revelation is heard so often that it no longer pierces the heart, but passes by like background noise. She lived close to faith, but never entered it. She stood beside light, but never stepped into it. There were moments when the house was quiet, when the world outside slept, and only the voice of a prophet rose in supplication. Moments when angels descended unseen, when dua climbed upward, when mercy hovered near. And still, her heart remained distant, untouched by what softened everyone else. This was not a woman who lacked exposure to truth. This was not a woman deprived of guidance. This was a woman who saw belief up close and chose distance anyway. Faith surrounded her, but submission did not. Revelation echoed through the house, but humility never entered her heart. And slowly, subtly, something dangerous took root. The belief that proximity was enough, that living beside a prophet carried weight on its own, that hearing truth was the same as accepting it. That familiarity could replace surrender. But faith does not seep into the heart by association. Iman does not pass through walls. Guidance is not inherited through marriage or environment. And this is the lesson hidden inside that sacred home. Being close to righteousness does not make one righteous. Hearing the truth does not mean obeying it. Living beside a prophet does not save a heart that refuses to bow. Day after day, reminders continued. Mercy remained open, patience endured, and still one heart inside that illuminated house stayed unmoved. Not because the message was unclear, not because the proof was insufficient, but because familiarity slowly killed urgency, and pride quietly replaced submission. The Qur'an describes her betrayal with a single chilling word, fakhanatahuma, a word often misunderstood, a word that exposes a danger far more subtle than open hostility. Allah was not speaking of immorality. There was no accusation against her honor, no stain upon her outward conduct. Her betrayal was deeper than that. It was a betrayal of belief. She lived beside Prophet Nūḥ alayhi salam, yet her loyalty stopped at the surface. Outwardly, she remained part of the household. She knew the rhythms of worship. She understood the language of faith. She could speak the words of belief when it suited her, but her heart stood elsewhere. This is the most dangerous form of disbelief, the kind that does not shout, but whispers, the kind that does not declare war, but quietly undermines truth from within. She did not confront the message openly. She did not stand in the streets mocking revelation. Instead, she learned how to appear aligned while inwardly opposing everything it stood for. She watched the patience of a prophet and mistook it for weakness. She saw mercy and interpreted it as naivety. She observed trust in Allah and dismissed it as foolish optimism. And so, slowly, her heart shifted. Disbelief did not arrive suddenly. It arrived strategically, carefully, calculated. It lived behind polite words and familiar routines. It hid beneath the appearance of loyalty while quietly siding with those who rejected the truth. This is why Allah chose her as an example, not because she was openly corrupt, but because she represents those who stand close to truth while secretly resisting it. She carried information, she observed conversations, she understood intentions. And when the moment came, she aligned herself with the enemies of faith not through open rebellion, but through silent cooperation. This is what makes At-Tahrim terrifying. A betrayal that does not break the home outwardly, but hollows it from within. A betrayal that wears the mask of familiarity. A betrayal that pretends neutrality while actively weakening the truth. She did not believe the message, but she also did not leave the house. She stayed close enough to benefit from its safety, its reputation, its protection. Yet when belief demanded submission, she withdrew. When faith required sacrifice, she calculated. When truth required humility, she hardened. And this is where many hearts fail. Not at the moment of disbelief, but at the moment of choice. Not when truth is absent, but when it is inconvenient. She chose comfort over conviction, alignment over submission, distance over sincerity. Allah did not condemn her for ignorance. Allah condemned her for betrayal because she knew. She saw the truth clearly enough to resist it intentionally. And that is the most frightening reality of all. Disbelief does not always look like rejection. Sometimes it looks like cooperation. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like standing beside faith while quietly working against it. This is why Allah warns humanity through her story. Because betrayal of belief is not always loud. And by the time it reveals itself, the heart has already sealed its own fate. Pride rarely announces itself at the door. It does not arrive as defiance. It grows quietly, feeding on comparison, comfort, and contempt. At first, it was only a glance, a look of dismissal when the believers gathered, a tightening of the lips when the poor stood beside Prophet Nūḥ alayhi salam, their clothes worn, their hands rough, their lives stripped of status. She saw them and felt above them. These were not the powerful, not the influential, not the ones whose opinions shaped the tribe or moved wealth from hand to hand. And slowly, without ever saying it aloud, a thought took root in her heart. If this message were truly from Allah, would these be its followers? Pride loves this question. It whispers superiority while pretending to seek reason. She began to measure truth not by revelation, but by reputation, not by sincerity, but by social standing. The more she watched the believers endure hardship with patience, the more she mocked them inwardly. Their humility looked like weakness. Their trust in Allah looked like denial of reality. They suffered poverty and still believed. They were mocked and still prayed. They lost status and still followed. And instead of humbling her, this strengthened her arrogance. She told herself she was thinking critically. She told herself she was being realistic. She told herself she was simply wiser than them. This is how pride disguises itself as intelligence. She heard the warnings. She saw the signs. She witnessed generations rise and fall while the message remained unchanged. Yet she believed herself too perceptive to be mistaken, too informed to be corrected, too elevated to submit. Mockery followed, not always spoken but felt. Why would Allah choose these people? Why would truth demand patience instead of power? Why would guidance walk barefoot among the poor? And with every unanswered question, her heart hardened further. Pride does not collapse under evidence. It reframes it. The more proof appeared, the more she interpreted it as coincidence. The longer Nūḥ alayhi salam remained steadfast, the more she called it stubbornness. The clearer the contrast between belief and disbelief became, the more she convinced herself that she stood on higher ground. She did not deny the message emotionally. She rejected it intellectually. And this is the most dangerous kind of arrogance, the kind that believes it has already considered everything. She did not bow, not because she lacked proof, but because bowing would mean admitting that those she despised were right, that the poor believers she mocked had seen something she had not. That submission required humility she refused to give. And so pride settled in, not violently but comfortably. It shaped her judgments. It filtered her hearing. It sealed her heart. Allah did not withhold guidance from her. She withheld herself from it. This is how arrogance destroys faith, not by denying truth outright, but by standing above it. And once the heart decides it is superior, no amount of evidence feels sufficient, because the problem was never proof. It was pride. Faith was never forced inside that house. Not once. Not even when disbelief sat at the same table as revelation. Prophet Nūḥ alayhi salam understood something many hearts refuse to accept. Guidance cannot be dragged into a soul. It cannot be imposed through authority, nor inherited through proximity. Even a prophet chosen, supported and guided by Allah, does not possess the power to compel belief. He spoke with patience that stretched beyond reason. He reminded without humiliation. He warned without coercion. Day after day, he called to Allah with words meant to awaken, not dominate. His da'wah was firm but never violent, clear but never crushing. He did not raise his voice to drown opposition. He raised his hands to the sky and trusted Allah to do what only Allah can do, turn hearts. Inside his own household, the test was sharper. The pain was closer. The truth was heavier. He lived with the terrifying reality that belief is a choice, even for those closest to him. That truth does not become obligatory simply because it is nearby. That hearts remain free, even when surrounded by light. He did not threaten faith into existence. He did not weaponize his status. He did not command submission with force. Because faith born of compulsion is not faith at all. And this is what makes the test so severe. Allah allows the heart to choose its own fate. No chain binds it to belief. No environment guarantees guidance. Even in a house touched by revelation, the door to disbelief remains unlocked. She heard the truth clearly. She understood the message fully. And still, she chose distance. Nūḥ alayhi salam did not shut that door for her. He did not lock belief behind obedience. He left space for reflection, for repentance, for return, because Allah does not love coerced submission. He loves hearts that bow willingly. This freedom is a mercy but also a danger. It means no one can hide behind lineage. No one can borrow faith from another. No one can blame their environment for their disbelief. Inside that prophetic household, belief and disbelief coexisted not because truth was unclear, but because choice was real. And perhaps that is the most frightening lesson of all. Allah did not prevent her from believing. Allah did not deprive her of signs. Allah did not silence the call. She was free, and she chose. This is why Nūḥ's patience was not weakness, it was obedience. He understood the boundaries Allah placed upon him. His task was to deliver, not to dominate, to warn, not to force, to invite, not to imprison hearts. And when rejection persisted, he did not retaliate. He did not curse immediately. He endured. He waited. He continued calling long after most would have given up. Because faith must rise from inside the soul, or it collapses at the first test. This chapter of the story is not about failure, it is about responsibility. The terrifying reality that Allah will never force your hand toward Him. He will open the door, illuminate the path, send reminders again and again, but the step must be yours. Even inside the house of a prophet, even with truth echoing in every corner, the choice remains yours. The first sound was not thunder. It was laughter. Wood rose where no river had ever flowed. Planks were lifted beneath a sky that had never known a flood. In the middle of dry land, where sand swallowed footsteps and the horizon promised nothing but heat, the shape of the ark began to appear. And the people laughed. They gathered not in fear but in amusement. Children pointed. Elders smirked. Voices carried mockery from one end of the land to the other. What kind of madness builds a ship where rain is a stranger? What kind of prophet warns of water in a world of dust? They watched Prophet Nūḥ alayhi salam work with his followers, hands roughened by labor, faces marked by patience. They saw him measure, cut, lift, and assemble with calm certainty. No hesitation, no urgency in his movements, no anger toward the laughter that followed him like a shadow. To the disbelievers, this calm was proof of delusion. If he were truthful, they said, the earth would already be shaking. If his warning were real, they mocked, the sky would have answered by now. And so, denial grew louder. Every plank laid became another joke. Every beam raised invited another insult. They did not argue the message anymore. They ridiculed the messenger. Mockery replaced debate, because mockery is easier than surrender. The ark rose slowly, and with it, their confidence rose faster. They laughed because nothing had changed. The sky was still blue, the ground still dry, life still comfortable. This is how denial survives. It feeds on delay. It mistakes mercy for falsehood. It interprets patience as weakness and silence as approval. They did not realize that warnings do not always arrive with urgency. Sometimes they arrive quietly, giving space for repentance, giving time for reflection, giving the soul one last chance to turn back before the door closes. But the longer nothing happened, the bolder they became. They laughed louder. They mocked harder. They reassured each other with confidence that felt unbreakable. If destruction were coming, they said, it would already be here. What they did not understand is that destruction does not announce itself early. It waits until certainty hardens into arrogance, until denial becomes identity, until turning back feels more humiliating than dying. The ark stood there, silent, immense, undeniable, a warning carved into wood, a sign visible to all. Yet the people passed by it daily, mocking what they refused to understand. This is the moment when truth becomes unbearable, not because it lacks clarity, but because admitting it would mean admitting they were wrong. And pride cannot survive that confession. So they chose laughter. Laughter is safer than repentance. Mockery is easier than humility. And while they laughed, the final warnings were already complete. The ark was not built in secret. The message was not whispered. The sign stood openly before them. But denial does not disappear when evidence increases. It often grows louder, more aggressive, more confident, especially when the end is near. They laughed because they believed the desert would always be dry. They did not know that the silence above them was not approval. It was restraint. And restraint never lasts forever. It began without warning, not with debate, not with argument. The sky changed first. Clouds gathered where clouds had never mattered before. The air grew heavy, thick with a silence that pressed against the chest. Then the rain fell not gently, not gradually, but with force. Sheets of water poured from above, as if the sky itself had been torn open. And at the same moment, the earth responded. Water burst upward from the ground beneath their feet, from cracks they had walked over for years, from places they had never feared. What had once been solid turned unstable. What had once been familiar became hostile. Panic spread faster than the rain. People ran into the streets, shouting questions no one could answer. Children cried, elders froze in disbelief. Voices rose in confusion as water climbed past ankles, then knees, then waists. The desert, their proof, their comfort, their certainty betrayed them. This was not a storm. This was judgment. Screams replaced laughter. Mockery dissolved into terror. Some ran toward the ark. Their feet slipped in the mud as realization struck like lightning. The warning was real. The patience was mercy. The delay was never denial. They ran with desperation, hearts pounding with fear and regret intertwined. But others did not move. Pride is a strange prison. Even as water rose around them, some stood frozen, unable to accept what their eyes now confirmed, unable to admit that the one they mocked had spoken the truth. Unable to surrender, even as death reached for them. Rain blurred vision. Water swallowed roads. Homes collapsed under pressure they were never built to endure. People screamed for help that could no longer reach them. They called out names of false gods who did not answer. They clung to possessions that weighed them down. They climbed structures that crumbled beneath their grip. And above the chaos, the ark stood steady, prepared, open. Those who believed did not hesitate. They climbed aboard not with arrogance but with trembling gratitude. They looked back not in pride, but in sorrow. Because faith does not celebrate destruction, it survives it. Among the chaos, a voice called out. A father's voice, breaking through rain and wind. Prophet Nūḥ alayhi salam called to his son, his voice heavy with urgency, with hope, with mercy that had not yet expired. Come with us, he cried. Do not be among those who disbelieve. But pride answered back. Some trusted hills. Some trusted strength. Some trusted denial to the very end. Water climbed higher. Waves formed where streets once were. The boundary between sky and earth vanished. Everything merged into chaos except one truth. There was no refuge except what Allah had prepared. And then realization arrived, but too late for many. Hands reached for the ark that could no longer wait. Voices begged for mercy they had rejected for years. Pride collapsed under fear, but fear could not undo a lifetime of refusal. The water did not pause for regret. It did not slow for realization. It carried away certainty, status, and arrogance alike. Those who ran toward salvation were lifted. Those frozen by pride were overtaken. And as the flood swallowed the land, one truth echoed louder than the storm itself. When denial waits until the last moment, it is no longer repentance, it is desperation. And desperation does not save. The water was already at her feet when the final choice stood before her. The ark loomed in the distance, solid, prepared, undeniable. It was no longer a warning. It was no longer a symbol. It was salvation, standing openly where mockery once echoed. And still, she did not move. This was no longer disbelief. This was ego. She saw the rain devour the sky. She felt the ground collapse beneath certainty. She heard the screams that once mocked, now begging for escape. Every excuse had drowned. Every doubt had been washed away. She knew. But knowing is not the same as submitting. To board the ark would mean admitting the truth she had spent a lifetime resisting. It would mean confessing, if only to herself, that the man she lived beside, the man she undermined in silence, the man she dismissed as deluded, had been right all along. And pride could not survive that confession. She stood frozen, heart racing, mind screaming for escape, yet her feet refused to follow, because surrender now would shatter the image she had built. It would undo years of superiority, calculation, and quiet defiance. She told herself she had gone too far to turn back, that stepping onto the ark would be humiliation worse than death, that salvation was not worth the shame of admitting error. This is how pride kills faith, not by denying the truth, but by refusing to bow to it. Nearby, others ran. Some slipped, some fell. Some reached the ark with hands trembling, eyes wide with fear and relief. They climbed aboard not because they were perfect, but because they were willing to be humbled. She watched them go, and something twisted inside her, not doubt, but resentment. Why should she be the one to submit? Why should she accept salvation on terms she did not choose? Why should she owe her life to a truth she had resisted for so long? The water rose higher. She lifted her chin as if dignity could outlast the flood, as if pride could breathe underwater, as if refusal were strength. In that moment, faith was not distant. Salvation was not hidden. Mercy was still within reach, but ego stood in the doorway. To step forward would mean letting go of control, letting go of the last illusion that she had been right, and pride would rather die than kneel. A voice carried across the chaos, urgent, breaking, filled with a mercy that had not yet expired. The voice of Prophet Nūḥ, alayhi salam, still calling, still inviting, still hoping beyond reason. But the invitation demanded surrender, and surrender demanded humility. She turned away, not because she doubted anymore, not because she lacked proof, but because belief now required something she refused to give. The water closed in, waves erased the ground beneath her. Panic finally pierced through pride, but too late to undo what pride had already decided. She did not die ignorant. She did not die unconvinced. She died insisting on standing. When the moment demanded bowing, this is the most terrifying ending of all. To reach the edge of certainty, to see the truth clearly, and still choose destruction simply to avoid admitting you were wrong. Pride does not always roar. Sometimes it stands silently and lets the soul drown. When the water finally receded, nothing remained of pride, lineage, or reputation. The land that once echoed with laughter stood silent. And the story was sealed, not as history alone, but as a warning meant to outlive generations. Allah did not preserve this account to speak about the past. He preserved it to confront the present. Because this story destroys one of the greatest illusions the human heart clings to, that salvation can be inherited, that being close to righteousness is enough, that knowledge, environment, or association can replace sincere belief. She lived beside Prophet Nūḥ alayhi salam, and it did not save her. She heard the truth repeatedly, and it did not save her. She understood the message clearly, and it did not save her. Why? Because Iman is not proximity, it is surrender. Allah did not judge her for ignorance. He judged her for refusal, for hearing the truth and delaying submission until delay became denial, for mistaking familiarity with faith as faith itself. And this lesson is not locked in ancient time. It lives now in hearts that hear reminders daily but postpone obedience. In souls that understand what is right, yet wait for a better moment. In lives surrounded by guidance, lectures, verses, and warnings while the heart remains unmoved. How many hear the truth and say, later? How many believe, but not enough to change? How many delay repentance, assuming time is guaranteed? The flood did not come suddenly. The warnings were not hidden. The ark stood openly visible, accessible, undeniable. What destroyed her was not lack of opportunity, but wasted opportunity. This is why lineage will not save you. Your family's faith is not yours. Your environment's righteousness is not your shield. Your knowledge of truth is not your submission to it. You will stand alone. The story forces a question upon every soul that hears it. If the ark were before you today, would you board it, or would pride delay you? Because the ark is not always wood and nails. Sometimes it is a command you keep postponing, a sin you refuse to abandon, a truth you accept intellectually but resist practically. And just like then, the most dangerous moment is not disbelief. It is delay. Delay hardens the heart. Delay numbs urgency. Delay convinces the soul that there will always be time, until there isn't. Allah's mercy is vast, but it is not mocked. He opens doors repeatedly, but He does not force anyone through them. When the final moment arrives, choice collapses into consequence. This story ends with loss, but it is told to prevent yours. Because salvation is still open, repentance is still accepted, the call is still echoing, but the question remains painfully simple. Will you submit when truth reaches you? Or will you wait until waiting costs everything? Only sincere iman saves. Only humility rescues. Only hearts that bow before the flood arrives are carried to safety. And when the final waves come, no one will be asked who you lived beside. Only who you chose to follow.